All right, you guys are good to go.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dominic.
Hello to everyone.
Hi, I've got my audio working, so we're good to go. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 1:05 p.m. If everyone will please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge, see, I even got a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Oh, I'm sorry. Of course, I've got somebody at the door. Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, can we get a roll call, Andrew?
Yes, Madam Chair. Councillor Sorg,
Here.
Mayor Barasa,
Here.
Councillor Bencomo,
Here.
Mr. Doolittle,
Here.
Trustee Garcia,
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez, Commissioner Sanchez,
Present.
Commissioner Solis,
Present.
Councillor Vasquez,
Here.
and Madam Chair. We do have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And does anyone have a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest that needs to be disclosed?
None.
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 No.
Thank you. And Andrew, I didn't receive any public, did you?
Madam Chair, I did not receive any public comment for this meeting.
Okay. And moving on to the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
This is Commissioner Sanchez. I'll move approval.
This is Trustee Garcia. I'll second it.
All right, thank you. Andrew, can you do the roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair. Councillor Sorg,
Yes.
Mayor Barasa,
Yes.
Councillor Bencomo,
Yes.
Mr. Doolittle,
Yes.
Trustee Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Commissioner Solis,
Yes.
Councillor Vasquez,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
thank you. And can I get an approval of the minutes, please? Motion to approve, rather.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Bencomo. Can I get a second?
Commissioner
Second.
Sanchez, I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanchez. All right. Andrew? Can we get a roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Councillor Sorg,
Yes.
Mayor Barasa,
Yes.
Councillor Bencomo,
Yes.
Mr. Doolittle,
Yes.
Trustee Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Commissioner Solis,
Yes.
Councillor Vasquez,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you. My apologies, everybody. When I was doing the Pledge of Allegiance, of course, somebody was knocking on the door. Okay, moving right along to action item 7.1, Resolution 20-08, a resolution amending the Mesilla Valley MPO Committee bylaws and operating procedures.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Andrew Ray for the record. If you'll bear with me for just a moment while I share my screen. Okay, before I get started, can everybody see the screen share?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. As everybody is aware, we had the discussion at last month's meeting regarding the language in the bylaws. The current language in the bylaws creates an inhibition for us as the MPO to hold a virtual meeting. We had the discussion at last month's meeting with a proposed language for an amendment to the bylaws. Had a good conversation, a suggestion from the policy committee about how to change the original draft of the language. That change has been implemented, as you can see in your packet, and is also the language that is present on the slide. The BPAC recommended approval of the bylaws amendment at their August 18th meeting, and the Technical Advisory Committee recommended approval at their September 3rd meeting. And that concludes my presentation, and I'll stand now for any questions. And I'll take the slide back to the language of the amendment.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mayor?
I make a motion, we approve the resolution.
Thank you, Mayor. Do I
I'll
have a,
second it, Madam Chair. Gilson.
okay. Counselor Sorg, thank you. Does any of the committee have any questions or comments? For Andrew, any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Andrew, would you like to do a roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair. Councillor Sorg,
Yes.
Mayor Barasa,
Yes.
Councillor Bencomo,
Yes.
Mr. Doolittle,
Yes.
Trustee Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Commissioner Solis,
Yes.
Councillor Vasquez,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to discussion items, EBID trail permitting process presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are very pleased to have with us on the line today Mr. Zachary Libben from EBID. He is going to be giving this afternoon's presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm also working on pulling up my presentation here. I sent it to Andrew so he can share with anybody that would like it.
Hi,
It's not
Zach.
that special.
See you again. This
Say
is,
that again? Councilman Sorg, could you say that again?
oh, it's good to see you is all.
Oh, nice to see you. You
Yes.
just have a picture, but
I'll get my camera going here.
you're okay. You're okay. It is nice to see you guys, though. So this afternoon, I do have a short presentation about both the permitting process, dealing with EBID, and more specifically to trails and how EBID, how we can deal with trails moving forward. Sorry, you caught me slightly off guard. Okay, I'm ready now. So okay, I'm ready. So again, first we're going to cover the permit process and then trail specifics, and then I'd really welcome any comments or input or questions that you all have. EBID is a quasi-government political subdivision formed to serve its members, specifically to serve our members with Rio Grande project irrigation water, surface water. Any use of EBID facilities requires a permit or a written agreement, whether that be a trail or to be even more specific, uses for EBID facilities for recreation are not permitted without some kind of agreement, whether that be a trail or a trail permit or whatever it is. Our permit process, I have a fact sheet that covers this in a lot more detail, and this has too many words in this slide, but our permit process is that an applicant must submit a right of use permit application to our engineering department here with a $50 plus tax application fee that's required with that application. Sorry. that application is available at our website, or you can stop by our office and work with us and get a copy from us here. We are allowing a limited number of people into our office currently, into our lobby. It's highly recommended that you start discussions with the BIDs, with our engineering department here, as soon as possible for design criteria and just discussions. And the trail is a very good example of a time when that is a really good idea to start that discussion early. Certain structures can only be designed and installed by EBID, and major works like bridges need to be designed by a professional, stamped by a professional engineer. General conditions, requirements, responsibilities can be found on the back of the right of use application, which is again available on our website, which those are also the same general conditions found on a special use permit. Recommend you review those thoroughly, but there's a lot of information there. Special conditions can be added as well, either by staff or during the board meeting. The board can add whatever special conditions they deem necessary to approve that permit. It gets an application that gets reviewed by EBID departments, the department heads, and then we provide a recommendation to EBID's board of directors. EBID's board meets the second Wednesday of each month, usually, and applicants don't need to be present. Applicants don't need to be present. However, if questions arise during the meeting, it'd be great if the permittee can help us answer those questions. Otherwise, it's likely to get tabled to the next month's meeting. We're not doing full screen. Applications take at least a month to get through our process of review and approval by our board. Something like a trail, working with the city of Las Cruces, for example, on the trails that were the first application that was recently approved by our board. That required several months of coordination on the design to make sure that design accommodated all of everybody's needs there. Construction can only take place during the non-irrigation season unless there's a very good reason, and any disturbance like on a bank would fit much better during a non-irrigation season. So again, general information can be found on our website. We've also got it here handy at our offices here. And then we have a fact sheet. I also included that when I sent this presentation to Andrew, I included that fact sheet. And it's very general. It's not about permits. I mean, it's not about trails. It's just about permits in general. But it does have some good information on there. I have here with me Lucas Doherty, who's our land and permit technician. And then our engineering and land assistant is Miss Anna Donahue. And then again, my name is Zach Libman. I don't know if I said that at the beginning. Got in a rush. Okay. The process specific to trails needs to start with an MOU. And we've set this process up with the city of Las Cruces as the first entity with a permitted trail. Started with before the trails could be allowed, we had to go to the state legislature, what we called the Trails Act. So that was required to allow EBID to have trails without assuming the liability of the trail. And a lawyer could tell you that any public entity can't indemnify another public entity, and that's not what's required for a trail. Just required that the permittee of the trail take responsibility and liability for that trail and the public using that property there. So that was worked out in 2009, and the first permit was issued to the city in 2009 for the portion of trail along the Doniana Drain that is the city outfall channel. So the city outfall channel goes down the portion of the Doniana Drain, and that part was permitted for that trail over there along the city outfall channel. So again, an MOU is required to establish mutual agreement, address liability and general conditions up front. Then city of Las Cruces and EBID have an MOU in place. And following the more recent approval of a permit for the Mesilla Drain segment of the city's Go Bond Trail, we've come up with some new special conditions. And we've been in discussion with the town of Mesilla on working on an MOU. And so those special conditions that we came up with that are sort of lessons learned and some new items that have arisen that need to be included in the MOU. And I think that document's going to turn out very good. MOU really lay out what we're trying to get done there. A special use permit still required for the discrete segment of EBID system, and that's where we get into the design and specifics of each one of those. And then the alignment for each discrete section of a trail needs to be discussed in detail with EBID up front so that we can work with our operations and maintenance departments to provide input. We, for example, with working with the city on the trails that they have planned with the Go Bond, EBID is not going to give up the bank that we use constantly for a trail, but we can work with, in most areas, designating one side that we don't use as much for the trail, because then the big benefit to us is getting the foot traffic away from the bank that we're going to be using and onto the other bank, leaving our operation and maintenance bank for our uses. And that comes up again later. So EBID's board will not approve permits for uses that significantly detriment EBID's purpose and objectives. And obviously our ditch riders being able to get to check gates and turnouts and such is would detriment our purpose and our objectives. So the trail has to be designed so that it doesn't significantly hinder EBID's operation and maintenance. So only one bank shelf will be authorized, with EBID dictating which bank will continue to be required for EBID's operation and maintenance. And under no circumstances will a permittee be allowed to simultaneously use both sides of an EBID facility, because we wouldn't, we'd have challenges being able to do our operation and maintenance. The permittee is responsible for liability and enforcement of non-motorized use and ensuring that the public doesn't use the other bank and doesn't enter the water prism, which is a concern of ours. No structures, pavement, park equipment, landscaping will be allowed to impede the water prism or freeboard. The trail would have to be will be subservient to EBID's purposes and agricultural functions and maintenance. No use will be permitted which will degrade the quality of the water. Trails must be mountable for EBID operation and maintenance when necessary, so that we can do, say, in an emergency or whatever it is. And then trails are subject to closure for emergencies. And if we had to do an operation and maintenance or whatever it was, they're subject to closure for that reason. So going back up one slide, this point about EBID will not approve permits that significantly detriment EBID's purpose and objectives. EBID is formed to serve the agricultural community with surface water. And on that note, the board has also made it very clear to us that we shouldn't waste our breath with trying to run a trail through an area of farmland. There's great places like through the city of Las Cruces, through the town of Mesilla, that farmland isn't adjacent to the canal where the bank where the trail might be proposed. If a permittee desires to run a trail through a pecan orchard, for example, they will need to have discussion and some kind of agreement with the adjacent landowner. Otherwise, it's highly unlikely that EBID's board would approve a permit for a trail that EBID's members aren't in agreement with. So in the event that improvements or landscaping are damaged during EBID's operation and maintenance or irrigation system emergencies, the permittee will be solely responsible for the costs associated with replacing the landscaping or improvements or trail EBID obviously fix the ditch break and repair the function of the canal bank that we need, but putting the trail back be the responsibility of the permittee. And then again, no liability can fall upon EBID for damage to any facilities or improvements installed by the permittee on EBID property. So if we do have to get in there for an emergency and it requires a track coat and that damages the trail, EBID won't be responsible for that. And then the probably the biggest hang up, and this is why the Trail Act was required, is that EBID won't be responsible for liability associated with the safety of the public utilizing the permitted property or for any criminal activity or in the vicinity of the permitted property. And the permittee has to maintain the trail in such a way that EBID can retain its immunity. The permittee is going to have to keep the inside and outside slopes of the bank of EBID's canal lateral drain free of weeds, trash, and debris and erosion. Again, we don't want to get in there on that side of the trail. We're going to leave that to the permittee to keep up with the weeds and such along there. The goal would be that we don't have to go down that bank with a backhoe to address weeds or whatever it is, that would be up to the permittee. And that leads us to the next point, that the permittee must address and respond to concerns or complaints of the public, users of the trail, neighboring landowners, EBID members, whatever it is stemming from the trail and any permitted use. We don't want to be dealing with if there's a pothole or there's a tumbleweed or whatever it is. That's not going to be EBID's responsibility to address those concerns. The permittee is going to have to place and maintain signage along the trail, notifying users that that only the bank designated for a trail is for public use, and that the other bank is the use of the other bank would be trespass and is not allowed. So that'll need to be made clear that the other bank is not to be a trail, so that we can do our operation and maintenance there. Again, that's a big benefit to EBID, that we can get that traffic off of the one bank onto the other bank, and then EBID can do its operation and maintenance from the one bank. So that's what we're agreeing to, is giving up normal operation and maintenance on the trail side in lieu of getting those folks off of our canal bank that we're using for operation and maintenance. Then lastly, sort of a right to farm act part of this, that the permittee can't allow the permitted use of EBID property to prevent or be detrimental to EBID's ability to operate and maintain its facilities or agricultural uses or farming practices of the neighboring landowners. The permitted use of EBID property shall not detriment the right to farm of the neighboring landowners. So we can't have whoever it is, the permittee, saying that farmer next to the trail can't spray zinc or can't spray herbicide or a pesticide or whatever it is because of the trail. We can't let that happen, because it's critical, obviously, that we keep the ability for our farmers to farm. Construction and maintenance of the bank that is designated for a trail is going to have to provide adequate freeboard, which means for like a canal that the bank's going to have to be built a bit in some places to meet our minimum freeboard, so that we are keeping the water in the canal. Specifically, once that trail is put on top, if we didn't require that bank to be built before we put a paved trail, for example, not that all trails have to be paved, I'm not saying that, but before it were to be paved, the bank's gonna have to be built up to that minimum freeboard, but it'll be hard for us to go back there and raise the banks, obviously, once there's asphalt on the canal bank. So gates, removable bollards will need to be constructed and maintained, again, to keep the motorized use off of the trail and to limit the public access to the side we don't want the public on. We also reserve the right that if a problem arises, we may need to require more gates in the future. And then EBID will have access to its property at all times to be able to do what we need to do. So with all that being said, I'm open to any questions or comments, concerns, input, whatever. If you guys have anything for me, we're happy to help.
Thank you, Mr. Livin, for that presentation. Very informative. Does anyone on the committee have any questions?
Madam Chair, I do.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Zach. How's it going?
Great. How are you doing today, Mayor?
I'm good, thanks. Zach, on the gates, does EBID install the gates there, or is it the responsibility of those that are building the trails to provide those gates? Because I know you'll need, for them to be locked, that you all will have keys. So who's responsible for installing the gates?
Along a trail, it'll definitely be the permittee's responsibility to install those gates. In general, we do cooperate with our farmers sometimes to put gates up, and they pay for the materials, and sometimes we'll install them, although we've been so behind on fabrication, we haven't been doing that much anymore. So for example, in the case of, say, a town of Mesilla Trail, we'll want the permittee to install those gates. And you're correct, the ones that removable bollards might be a little bit tricky. We could probably share a key for those, but any gate on EBID facilities always need to have an EBID lock, and if they can, so pretty much they need to have both of our locks on it so we can get in whenever we need to, and the permittee for any gate, any farmer, whoever it is, they can have their lock and we can have our lock.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you, Mayor. Does anyone else have any questions, comments?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes, Counselor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Livin, for the presentation. Very informative. First, I want to say thank you for your partnership with the city for creating a better trail system here that is just really beneficial for our community. It's I think the EBID laterals and canals have been used for a long time, informally probably, right, for recreational purposes, walking and biking and that kind of thing. So being able to legitimize this through a formal MOU, I think is a great benefit to our community. I'm wondering, in terms of the permittees that you currently have, do you have other permittees for trail uses besides the city of Las Cruces and maybe Mesilla?
Counselor, we do not yet. Currently, the city, likewise, I'd like to share your thanks back to the city for the city working with EBID to legitimize some of these areas and get these trails built and to make these beneficial multi-use access legal. And I think that's one of the benefits to EBID too, is to legalize that. And then again, the city's taking the liability is a big help to EBID as well. So that's one of the benefits to EBID, and one of the reasons the board's willing to consider that. And it's been one of Gary's visions for a long time that we partner in that. So the answer to your question is no. We don't have any other permittees at this point. It has been a pleasure working with the city staff as well. Tony Trevino and these folks have been very easy to work with, cooperative, and we've definitely made a lot of headway on these permits and the designs for the trail specifically. So that's been going well, and I think that will help spur some of the other entities to want to do that as well. So we've been working with the town of Mesilla. I guess I just lost the guy's name at the town of Mesilla. Just blanked. I can see his face, but anyway, he's been a pleasure to work with at the town of Mesilla as well. And we're just starting the process. The Doñana County is the only other entity that we've talked about trails with, but they have been not as cooperative as the city or town of Mesilla. But eventually we'll probably also have a trail with the Village of Hatch in the near future too. We're already working on a pipe and a lateral to set up a great place to have a trail to the Village of Hatch as well.
Thank you, Mr. Livin. That's exciting to hear, that potentially we could have a network of local governments that would partner with EBID to formalize this network of transportation and recreation. I think it's such a great asset that we have here that could just continue to expand. So thank you for that. I have a question as it relates to special events. Assuming that, like many other city parks or recreational facilities, there might be an interest from the public in hosting a special event. For example, I'm thinking a 5K run or 10K run, or maybe even a bicycle race or something like that, fundraiser, all those kinds of things that people do on city parks. How does the special event fit in within an existing permit with a local government? Is the city allowed to then issue special event kind of permits, or is that something that needs to go back to EBID for additional permission?
I'll be honest that is a really good question, and that's one that we've kicked around recently because it hadn't been thought of during the MOU. So it would be great if that was something we could address in the MOU. You got to be careful not to speak without talking to your council first, but my opinion would be that once the city's taken the liability of that, I wouldn't see any issue with the city having a fun run, as long as the city is again, being the permittee, has blessed that as something that you're willing to take the responsibility of, that you don't, that somebody doesn't decide to have a motorcycle race down the canal bank and say the city gave them permission when you didn't. I think
Yep.
that's probably that's where I'd be coming from, but that would be great if we could have that addressed in the MOU, so that up front our lawyers, specific counsel specifically, or have a chance to have input on that. But I think my opinion would be that once it's blessed as a city trail and the city's willing to take responsibility for that, then it should be able to be included within that original permit, I think.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful to think about that. And then the other question is around motorized use, ATVs, UTVs. As long as I've lived here and have been around the ditches, I've seen motorized use and dirt bikes as well on the ditches frequently. Honestly, all the time. Any given day, there's probably some motorized use, and so a lot of that happens on the trails that are not, or on the laterals and ditch banks that are not going to be part of the official maybe trail system. So how does EBID currently deal with the issue of enforcement of motorized use on your trails or on your laterals?
So you are correct. It's hard to deny that there's not a lot of that going on. We are working daily on addressing that through signage mostly at this point. Enforcement of that is extremely hard as well, because we have worked with the county sheriff and the city police and codes enforcement, the town of Mesilla Marshall worked with those entities to help us with enforcement of these issues. But again, an ATV, for example, unless they were to stop and wait for the police officer to come, for example, they're going to be very hard to make an example of one, or to address that. We are putting up more gates as necessary, and anyone can apply for a permit for a gate. So farmers are commonly applying for permits for gates. An example would be, another example would be that the city could apply for a permit for a gate anywhere if they're having a problem with that. Likewise, EBID has installed plenty of gates just to address that. Where, like Tortugas, for example, I had a terrible issue with those folks trying to use that as a shortcut, and four-wheelers and such, and it got dangerous and very challenging for our ditch riders. So gates are tricky because on canals and laterals, they obviously have to be open during water season so that our ditch riders don't have to open and close a gate everywhere they go. But we do want, especially non-irrigated, drains can be gated almost any time, but non-irrigation season, we want those shut down, just to make that really clear to folks. That is not a road. And that's one of the biggest issues, is that if it's a city road or a county road, then that's great. We can work out that agreement, but otherwise we do not allow motorized use of our banks, with one exception, but we don't allow motorized use of our canal banks for legal ingress and egress, recreation, any of those kind of things. I've got we've been putting little utility markers up with some stickers on them that say maintained for the storage and diversion of water, no trespassing, not a road. all over
Okay.
the place. And now that I show that to you, you'll probably see them around. We put up 1,400 of them so far and got another 2,000 to install. Working to get it more clear to folks that they're not supposed to be there. And then that makes enforcement just that much more important too, that we do address that at some point. But definitely a challenge and definitely a problem, both liability, but also just our normal operation and maintenance. When you've got somebody that pulls up to you on a four-wheeler and stands there looking at you like you need to back up and get out of their way, it's challenging.
Thank you, Mr. Livin. I appreciate your honesty in that, and I know it's a challenge. In terms of the enforcement piece of that, I think it's important to start thinking more about proactive enforcement. I could imagine, and I've seen it happen actually, conflicts between users on whether it's cyclists or trail runners, with folks clearly that are on motorized vehicles on trails that are not meant for them. As those trails become more widely used, and I can see it perhaps happening more this summer just because of the amount of people that are outside walking and being outdoors. Those conflicts could potentially be bad, but also, as you mentioned, all the other issues related to just the safety of having motorized vehicles on the trails anyway, and in the laterals. But I think that's something for us to maybe continue to look at with a partnership between the city and EBID, and maybe even some targeted enforcement operations from the part of within the city jurisdiction of police department and also Doña Ana County. I just think it could go bad with increased traffic if we're not proactively trying to enforce some of those issues. I'm sure our local city police department would be willing to work with you on something like that. And we do hear complaints, from folks from our constituents as well, of just high speeds, folks riding down high speeds, especially down by the river, mostly in the Mesilla, but some of it around the valley area as well. I think those are mostly all my questions. I'm going to throw one wild card out there just because we're here. But I've always wanted to have perhaps a natural area for folks to fish, like a little pond or something in the city that would tie into some of the ditches and maybe use some existing water rights to build a nice little place. When I was a kid, I used to fish at the near the Mesilla Valley Bosque State Park, because it just, some of those places held a lot of water and a lot of different species of fish. And I always thought, man, how cool would it be to have a place for families to fish? But is there anything, has EBID ever given any thought to creating, in terms of expanding the recreational use, a little pond or something like that for families and kids to fish around the ditch network?
So I mean, Gary would never say no to that idea, with the caveat that liability is always the issue, right? So
Sure.
We've created some neat sites in Rincon, and we've got a really neat site down Sunland Park we call Diaz Lagos, where we've widened a drain, made it into a habitat site. It's not designed specifically for aquatic habitat. It's more riparian avian habitat, but there are certainly fish there as well. And using that as an example, the city of Sunland Park wanted to call that a recreational site and allow fishing there. We could definitely work that out. So I don't think that's out of the question. Liability is the first challenge. We don't usually allow the public on EBID property unless it's permitted, right?
Yep.
But beyond that, there are some neat opportunities even near the Mesilla Valley Bosque State Park. We've got a great project just north of there. Might be a little bit trickier in terms of access to the public, because it's on private property. I'm not sure if that farmer would want that to be a public site, unless, again, we talked to him about it and somebody took the responsibility of that, state park or whatever it is, state parks or whatever it is, wanted to take the responsibility of that. We could certainly allow that. I think that's a creative idea that's worth pursuing. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilor Song.
Yes, I just a message to Councilor Vasquez to stay tuned. Later this month, we'll be talking just about that. very subject here coming up in our work session.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sorgan. Thank you, Mr. Libin. Those are all my questions. I appreciate it. And again, thanks for your partnership with the city on the trails.
Likewise.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vasquez. Great dialogue, great information. Does anyone else from the committee?
Yes,
Madam Chair, I have a question as well.
Yes.
so do I.
Okay, I think we'll start with Councillor Bencomo and then follow with Councillor Zorg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you for those questions, Councillor Vasquez. That's a great conversation. Maybe you can talk about Burn Lake and how Burn Lake can also be included in this fun conversation. And thank you, Mr. Libin. It's nice to Zoom meet you and for the presentation. I'm one of the newer counselors on here, so it's great to hear this background information. Just for my own curiosity, the EBID board of directors, are those appointed or elected, or who are those members?
EBID's board of directors, there's 9 board members. Although they have a geographic zones, they're elected at large, or they're elected by the entire EBID membership with greater than 2 water righted acres. So the EBID's board are elected by its members of farm tracts. So we consider less than 2 acres to be a flat rate or a small tract user. And honestly, they don't get a vote on the board. But those tracts large, 2 acres and larger, each one of those landowners gets 1 vote towards the board of directors for EBID.
I see. Great, thank you. Honestly, my only other question is around, since I have you here also, around cleanup, and just because I get a ton of constituent calls around some of, like ditch cleanup that runs right behind their house. Curious for you, can you let me know like what that schedule is, what that process is, what's the best way for people to connect with you about it? And then, I know this is a ton of questions, but maybe my last question around it is how can we better coordinate with EBID in the city to ensure that some of these places are the cleanup is kept up with?
Those are great questions. And one first point to make is that EBID's purpose is definitely to deliver water to its members. We have a network of canals and laterals as well as a drain network. And the drain network, which are probably the more problematic for cleanup and debris and such, are intended to drain the groundwater, keep the groundwater table from getting so high that it detriments the farming. So those are not maintained very often. They may sometimes be on a 10-year rotation of being maintained. And the only place that sort of becomes a problem is where the EBID and the city interact then. So the city residents would like to have that much more beautified than is what EBID's purpose. So EBID and the city have been talking about this for a long time, apparently. So I think it was 1964, the city and EBID entered into a beautification agreement where the city agreed to, the Bureau of Reclamation at the time, in fact, agreed to keep up with the maintenance a bit more within the city limits. I'm not using my lawyer terms, but the Bureau of Reclamation agreed to keep up with maintenance more. And the city of Las Cruces agreed to help in certain cases for all the pipe portions and also places where EBID's equipment is too large, because we are better suited for sort of the middle of nowhere farming, farmland. We are good at cleaning out a drain ditch in Garfield, New Mexico, but you get up against a bunch of homes in Mesilla or Las Cruces, it's a lot trickier. You can't just pile the debris. Like when we're going through and our first flush of water, we go through with a backhoe and dip out that trash and set it by the side of that culvert, let it drain out. To be honest, in the middle of nowhere, when it's tumbleweeds, they burn it in the middle of nowhere. In the city, it's not tumbleweeds, it's styrofoam and floatables and a bunch of trash. And we do set that to the side to be picked up later. And we have been working with the city streets department to come up with some better solutions to how we can get that done. Because again, like you're saying, somebody will call and say, hey, you guys put this here yesterday, you need to come pick it up. And we're saying, well, I mean, we're still flushing water. We are not going to get it to it tomorrow or even this week, but we need to not let it sit there for a year either. So we are working with the city road department. We're also working on updating that beautification agreement to better outline some of these areas, make it better defined, and make enforcement a better part of that. I mean, we do need code support in that. We both deal with homelessness along the Armijo lateral, for example, and folks saying the homelessness behind our building is out of control, and then city codes may say we can't do anything about it because it's CBID property, which isn't true. We just have to work together on addressing these problems together. So in summary, we do have a beautification agreement already, and we need to work on updating that and seeing if we can't step that up a bit in tandem without it being all the complaints going to the city or all the complaints coming to EBID, so we can work together on getting that cleaned up so it can be a beautiful city, and even where EBID intersects the city.
Absolutely. Thank you for that explanation. I'll definitely check in with our new city manager about this and the beautification agreement and how we can best work together. Like you said, I mean, I'm very excited about the Go Bon Trail system that's upcoming. Not just for myself, I live right next to the Armijo lateral, but for District 4 and the opportunity for connectivity and getting people, out of their cars and walking to places. So I'm very excited about what that's going to provide. And of course, would love to just see it, like you said, more beautiful. And so I'll definitely touch base with our city manager, and perhaps we can touch base back with you just on how we can improve this. So thank you very much. That was all my questions, Madam Chair.
I'd also like to offer for anybody on this MPO policy committee, especially city councilors and such too, would love to offer a tour of the district and show you sort of the north and south extents of some of the district and some of the stuff that we are doing, because we are doing some exciting projects that are maybe not within the city limits, but can have impacts to the water supply.
Thank you, Mr. Libben. I would love that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Libben. Thank you, Councilor Bencomo. Councilor Sword.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank Zach and the Elephant Butte Irrigation District, its board of directors and members for doing this. This has been a long time in the making. Many times in the past, I've seen these laterals and canals and so forth, that thinking that it would be such a great place for people to get out and do some walking and maybe even some birding, and to better for the public. So again, thank you very much, Zach, and everyone involved in this. Appreciate it. And just as a last word, I'm always up for a tour. Let me know.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Sword. Anybody else from the committee?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mayor.
So I just want to definitely thank Zach for working with Rod on this project that we have going on here in the town of Mesilla with the trail. And I don't know if everyone here on the committee has had an opportunity. The trail is in the works. It's coming off the river levee here on Calle del Norte, which is very close also to the Bosque Park. And so I know we here in the town of Mesilla are very excited about it, to have this walking trail. And hopefully with phase 2, which is one of the ones that will be actually on one of the EBID irrigation ditches, that is going to be something new for us, but we're excited. And so it's all new to us, but then we're also working with EBID, more Department of Transportation. And Trent, you can comment on this too, is on University Avenue, where EBID is working as a partner with Department of Transportation to put that lateral on University underground. So I'm really excited about that. More and more people are using the ditches for walking. Ever since the pandemic started, there are numerous people out there on their bicycles or walking their children, their dogs, bicycling. So I see in the future where more and more of the ditches will be used for walking trails. So I appreciate the partnerships that we have with EBID and them open and willing to work with municipalities to make this happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other committee comments or questions for Mr. Libben? Oh, okay. Again, thank you. Very informative. And thank you for all that you're doing for all of our region and the residents. And so thank you, Mr. Libben.
My pleasure. It's a pleasure working with you all too.
Yeah. And your staff as well. Thank you. All right. Andrew, are you ready to provide a joint powers of agreement update?
Yes, Madam Chair, although before I move to that, I will say that I'm going to email out a copy of Mr. Libben's presentation and the fact sheet that he provided to the policy committee as soon as this meeting is over.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Bencomo.
I was just going to ask Andrew if he could include his, Mr. Libben's email address.
I will certainly do that as well. Moving on then to the JPA update. This is going to be a very brief update. The work that we've done over the past month is I've gotten the information from the City of Las Cruces, NMDOT, and Doñana County about who their preferred representatives for the specific negotiating process itself. Councilor Sorg is going to represent the City of Las Cruces. Mr. Doolittle will represent NMDOT. Doñana County has designated Miss Angela Robertson from their Community Development Department. She's the chief planner as the representative, and the town of Mesilla I have not heard from as of yet, so I'm hoping maybe today, but soon. The process that I think we will need to do is I'm hoping to have all the information for the October policy committee meeting for the policy committee to have an action item to specifically designate and empower the subcommittee to undertake the JPA negotiation process. And then once that vote is taken, then we can go ahead, the subcommittee can start work. As I have said from the beginning, this is a brand new process for me. I was not a participant in the last time around, so I think we're all kind of going to be making it up as we go along. But I'm hopeful that once the negotiation process gets started, it won't take more than a month or so. So hopefully by the end of the year, we might have a draft of the JPA to present to the policy committee for action. At that point, we will then need to start taking it to the city council, the county commission, and the board of trustees for their action to adopt the JPA, and then it would be sent to the state of New Mexico for the state of New Mexico's consent. So even once we get this process rolling, it is going to be several months worth of work. So I don't want to mislead anybody to think that we're even though it's taking a while, we're not working on it. So just, does anybody have any questions or comments about where we are in the process before we move on?
Andrew, I believe that the mayor had sent an email stating that she was going to represent the town of Mesilla. It just needs to go through the board for a vote, but I believe that she had sent an email.
Madam Chair, she did. I guess I interpreted that as provisional until waiting for action from the board, and I had not heard if any action from the board had taken place, and the subcommittee has not been empowered by the policy committee to meet yet, so there's been no activity. But I did receive that message from the mayor, but I wasn't sure if that statement from the mayor was final yet.
No, you're correct. It still has to be presented to the board. Yeah, but I believe the mayor's gonna serve on it. So, all right. Any other questions for Andrew? comments regarding the JPA? None? Okay, moving on to Mr. Doolittle.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief. We really still only have the one project ongoing in the area, which is University and I-25. Continues to progress very well. Anytime you drive through there, you get to see numerous changes. I expect here in the next few weeks, they'll start setting the girders and getting ready to do the Traverse Bridge. So that'll all start to come together to see how Traverse will dump under the university into Pan Am. When that bridge goes up, so it'll be a little more visible. The other thing I wanted to share with you all is we've been working very long on the New Mexico 404 and 213 corridor. For those of you that aren't aware, that's the Anthony Gap that crosses from I-10 to Chaparral and then south into the Texas state line. We actually bid phase 1, which is the interchange at I-10. We bid that on August 21st. It came in a little bit high, but I don't see any reason that the contract won't be awarded. I would expect that we'll see construction begin probably towards the end of this calendar year, the first of next year. But anybody that's driven through that knows that bridge is pretty narrow. The signals aren't timed real well because they're really close together, and there's a lot of traffic using that as a bypass through around El Paso because of the construction. So we're excited to get that project started. And then just so you all know, phase 2 will be 4-laning all of 404 to the 213 intersection. It'll be divided highway with concrete barrier, 4 lanes. We have talked about bringing in multi-use trail, access for bicycles, those kinds of things that will separate them from the traffic, knowing it's used quite a bit. But we're in the design phase of that, so I don't have a whole lot of details, but I wanted you all to be aware what we're doing along that corridor. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you all is on Friday, NMDOT is presenting to the Legislative Transportation Infrastructure Revenue Subcommittee. This is something we do every year. We go over our needs. We highlight some of our successes that we've had over the past year, but I just wanted you all to be aware that as we get into the legislative session in the next several months, we as a department will start presenting to subcommittees. So that's where I'll be on Friday. It's actually a Zoom meeting, which is going to be kind of interesting. But I'll be presenting to them on Friday. And with that, Madam Chair, I don't really have much else, but I'll take any questions anybody may have.
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Sanchez.
Madam Chair, you're muted if you're trying to speak.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Sanchez, my apologies.
Thank you. Mr. Doolittle, I'm excited to hear that 404 is getting a facelift. I know having to ever go to the El Paso airport and then just from my family going to the northeast part of El Paso, I know or Chaparral, cutting across can be depending on, it's really increased the amount of traffic that's gone through there with everything that's growing in El Paso and Chaparral in that area. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that progresses. I was just wondering if you had any updates on the A to B study on I-25 and also the Elks Trail.
Commissioner, I don't have an update for you. I'll try to find something out and share that with you all. I'm not sure how far along they are with that. Last month, they were reviewing and negotiating the cost of the RFP. So if they have started, it's going to be very preliminary, but I'll see what I can get for you. And then the other thing I'll be sure to do as we move forward is when they have their public meetings, I'll let you all know so that you can certainly share with your constituents so that they can provide their concerns. But I don't have much on that one for you. I apologize, but I'll work on that. And then the other one you mentioned was the Elks Trail.
Yeah, that one on I believe it was part of the TIP plan. I thought that was still within the DOT, or DOT was providing some, maybe it was just you're providing funding to the county for that.
It must be. I'm not aware of a project that we have to do any trails along Elks.
Okay, because it's the trail, and Andrew, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the money may have come in or may have been approved by the DOT, but it was going to be the multi-use path from it was on Elks, just north of the Columbia Elementary, going up to the Doniana Park area right there. But I thought it was all part on DOT right of way.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sanchez, Mr. Doolittle. No, that project is on the county right of way. To the best of my knowledge, up there, the NMDOT relationship is that DOT is providing oversight and providing the funding through the mechanism of the Transportation Alternatives Program. That's process is run through the South Region Design Center. I believe it may be Judith Gallardo, but it might also be Jessica Hunter. I can't remember off the top of my head who are the appropriate liaisons for NMDOT to provide updates on that. I actually personally, MPO staff, I have not received an update about the status of that project, so I'm not able to provide any additional information myself at this time either.
No, thank you, Andrew. And I'll if it is within the county, I'll get with our roads and engineering department and get an update. I appreciate it. Now, and Mr. Doolittle, yeah, if you get any updates on that, on the A to B study, I really appreciate it. I was just curious where we stand on it. And you hit the nail on the head in terms of getting public input or opportunities for it. I just want to find if there are ways and make sure we're advertising, because I figure that it might be virtual or something of that nature. So I want to make sure especially the constituents in Doniana, in the Doniana area, have an opportunity there, particularly to give some input on that northern section.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanchez and Andrew as well. Any other questions for Trent or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Thank you, Trent.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, you're very welcome. Do we have any committee comments before I turn it over to Andrew? Okay, seeing none. Andrew, any staff comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have one. As the committee is aware, Ms. Valerie Sherman left the MPO last month to take a job in Texas. Unfortunately, I had hoped to be able to report to the policy committee that we had gotten the job posted. We have not been able to do so. We're dealing with some administrative issues internal about getting the position description updated. The last time that we actually hired for the associate planner position was back when Dr. McAdams was hired back in 2014. So you can imagine that was 6 years ago. And the associate planner position has changed significantly in that time. And now the associate planner is responsible for the coordination and oversight of the traffic count program, which makes it a very different position than than the other associate planner positions within the city of Las Cruces. So we're currently trying to get the job description updated and rewritten so that it accurately reflects the responsibilities of what the MPO will be expecting of the associate planner, so that we basically, the objective is we want to ensure that we have informed applicants who will understand there's going to be an outdoor component to this position. We don't want to bring anybody in and them not understand that from the beginning. So we're still tied up in that. I'm hoping to be able to work through this very soon, working with my director within the city of Las Cruces to get that pushed on through. So hopefully by the October meeting, I'll be able to announce that we have the position posted. And that's the only MPO staff update. Well, there's one other thing. Next month, I know the committee is aware that we that we had to change the tip process that earlier this year NMDOT was planning to go to a 4-year tip cycle. After consultations with FHWA, NMDOT leadership pulled back on that decision, and we're now going to remain with the 2-year tip cycle. Unfortunately, we approved the UPWP without a tip development cycle in it because we didn't anticipate that we were going to need it. So we will be bringing a UPWP amendment to the policy committee at the October meeting.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And did we get any public comment?
Madam Chair, let me check my email. I have not, I got several dings, but none of them relevant to this meeting. So no, Madam Chair.
Okay, with that, thank you everyone for your participation. We'll see you next month. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.